So Weld Metals Online sent out this new stuff called the Weave Trainers, which is, I got the stainless versions of it to test out here. So as soon as they showed up, I copped a squat here right on the student's chair where we teach the classes here. And I was like, you know what, these things are too freaking awesome. I already welded one side. Let's just break out the cameras. So sorry, it's a little bit raw here. You're seeing all of this in action, which normally I keep behind, but let's talk about some weaves, how to do them, what I'm looking for, and maybe if you guys get a hold of some of these things, you'll see exactly what it takes to make your own weaves and to learn how to do them, because they're pretty useful. So let's just do that today. That's what I'm feeling like doing.
Season 5.
So this particular piece is called the stitch. It's 4 dabs wide, and I'm kind of really having to concentrate on this just because it's a little off of the normal pattern that I run. I think it's a little stretched out. I usually run them a little bit tighter, but I see a lot of reasons why this is extremely good. And if you guys stick around till a little bit later, or if you just get impatient and check the comments or the description, you'll find a discount code for Weld Metals Online, courtesy of them and TFS. But here's essentially what I'm doing. We'll get into the theory and all the rest of that stuff later. But right now, I'm taking that leading edge of that weld pool and keeping it along with that line so I can see it. Every time a line intersects, or it changes direction, like I hit a corner, my torch changes direction too. All I'm really paying attention to is the actual size of the weld pool, the consistency of it, how it looks, how it solidifies every single time I move that torch. Now my foot is basically connected to the weld pool, right? My foot controls everything. So the more I depress the pedal, the more amperage I get, the larger my weld pool is. The less I depress it, the more my puddle is going to solidify. But I want to keep that fluidity. Okay, I got that just a teeny tiny bit hot maybe. The machine is currently set to about 75 amps, and I'm just kind of working that, as I need it. Like I mentioned before, that we're, the pedal, when we need more, we need less, wherever it is. We don't have like an exact number of where the machine is set at, where it's going to run. All I'm doing is connecting my eyes with my foot, which controls the torch, right? As weird as that sounds, but that's all we're really doing. What we see in front of us is what we use for our weld. Now, that's the 4 dab wide that they call the stitch. We also have some other ones here. We have the zipper, which is 2 dabs wide, and we have the braid, which is 3 dabs wide. I got to try and remember all these names, but we're going to get into those too. A little bit of theory. Why do we weave? Well, it's not like it's we need to weave for any particular reason. Typically a weave, or at least the 2 dab wide weave, is the direct result of walking the cup. So when you go back and forth on the cup and you do that pattern and all the rest of the stuff, the weave or that zipper look is typically what we get when we're walking the cup. So a lot of people, for good exercise or control or training or anything else like that, will typically just dab in their own weaves and stuff like that. It's also good for material buildup. So if you wanted to go over something 3 different times, or if you wanted to go over it once with 3 dabs wide or something like that, that's why we use weaves. But aside from that, they're fantastic for training. I absolutely love using them for training. We use them here in the classes and everything else like that. But let's dig into a different one here. Let's try the 3 dabs wide, and we'll go backwards, I guess you could say. We'll pull these out here. These are stainless. They're also available in carbon steel, but I got stainless just because I like this stuff. So let's see how this one runs. So typically the first part is the most difficult. This is stainless steel, so you want to get moving on relatively quick. And of course this pattern is what they call the braid. It is 3 dabs wide, basically a zigzag with a dab in the middle of it. Once I've established my weld pool, the size of it, every single time I move this torch with is pretty much nothing more than my fingertips. I'm making sure the puddle or the weld pool moves with the torch. If I get a little bit too hot, you'll notice that it kind of hangs out behind. I haven't got it too hot yet, but if I keep it too hot, it's going to hang behind. What I want it to do is follow with the torch. Every time I move it, I want to see everything else behind it solidify. A good sign or a solid indication that you've got that, or you got the temperature just right, aside from having it move with you, is you'll typically see little ripples, what we usually call freeze lines. Those freeze lines are basically that puddle solidifying perfectly, like literally just right, every time you move it. As far as adding filler is concerned, I'm not adding a bunch. I'm just letting it kind of wick off right at that edge of that weld pool. And again, I'm keeping the edge of the weld pool itself nice and tight, right up to the edge of the lines that are etched into the coupons on the weave trainers. I want to be able to see those. I'm also kind of feeding it with my hand, little by little. Just a tiny, tiny bit. Now I know if my puddle runs away from me, I'm getting way too hot. If I add in a dab and it doesn't quite work out the way that I want it to, it comes in kind of clumpy, I need to add a little bit more amperage, which is basically step on the pedal a little bit more. My information is all coming from what I can see. What's in front of me is what I use. So as long as I got that nice clean weld pool that follows along with the torch, I got my freeze lines, I got my ripples, I got everything I need, I'm good to go. If I get a little out of position, a little bit uncomfortable, I'm just going to stop. But this one, I made it all the way through. We'll let that post flow run, and we're good to go. I mean, you almost can't screw this up. I mean, I know how to do a 3-dab wide weave, and I play with weaves all the time. And like I mentioned before, in our stainless class, we actually teach the weaves. We don't use these, but I'm about ready to consider doing exactly that. But we teach the weaves when we're actually doing this because it's a fantastic control exercise. So what we're basically looking to do is connect our eyes with our foot. So if we see that the weld pool is a little bit too wide or a little bit too narrow or it's a little bit too clumpy, we know that if our eyes see the weld pool looking like that, we either need more amperage, less amperage, maybe a little bit more travel speed, maybe a little bit less. But our travel speed is limited to how fast you can accurately add your filler rod, and that's another one of those things that needs to connect just right in order to get it. So control of the torch, positioning, torch height, everything else like that, that's a really important thing. So since this one went so flawless, let's blow up the other side because I've got 2 weave patterns on this side here. So let's kind of screw this one up and see what happens when we just totally waste it, right? That's what we should do. I'm gonna get some more filler rod here. This is 308 filler rod and it's 045 diameter. I like the smaller stuff because you can always add more to your weld pool to get that definition of your bead, but you can't always add less with a larger diameter. And since we're running a little bit less on the amperage to try not build up so much heat, we're using much smaller stuff. So let's totally waste this one here. Let's just totally like cook it. Okay, first things first, we're going to set this up correctly, right? And I'm just going to make my dabs. Just come in here just like normal. Watch them very carefully, the consistency of the weld pool. It's solidifying as I move. Everything's good, right? But let's just say that my torch height wasn't good. We get to the end of this one, we'll just pick it up here. I just kind of lost the control of my weld pool. I can back way off of my amps here, but I don't have a lot of definition on that weld pool. It kind of wants to wander away. And I'm starting to lose the lines here. Now, all the classes that I've taught and all the people that I've instructed, we've had about 300 or so here at TFS that have come from all over the world, and torch height is usually the #1 problem we see with people when they're first starting out. And it's definitely a killer here. I am completely losing these lines. Let me sink this back down here. See if I can get this back into shape. I can feel a ton of heat coming off of here onto my glove right now. I'm pretty sure this coupon is red hot. Now, let's really mess this up here. We'll get a lot of angle. If you look carefully, my torch is angled so far that my weld pool is blowing forward, more like into the filler wire. So I have like an oblong or an oval shaped weld pool, and my foot is all over the place right now trying to control this. It's this isn't working too well for me here, and my fingers are just roasting right now. Let me fix this real quick. So the fact of the matter on this one, if you're still paying attention here, the closer the torch is, the less resistance and the smaller the cone that comes off of it. Ergo, the more control you have over your weld pool. It stays cooler the closer you are to it. Too close is touching. Too close is making contact. So you want to keep it as tight as possible without touching it. And you want to keep your torch as perpendicular to your work as possible. That means no more than about 10 to 15 degrees of a forward angle. Forward meaning the direction that you're traveling, and that's usually kind of tricky because normally you're traveling into your filler wire. On this one, we are technically adding our filler wire to the side of that weld pool because we're traveling back and forth in a zigzag, but technically, even though we're making a zigzag left and right, we're still traveling this way, which this would be forward. So tricky as it may seem, but there's kind of a couple of things. One, watch your torch height. Your torch height, if it's like sky high, like Burj Khalifa, world's tallest building, you're gonna have some issues with it. You probably saw that it was kind of blowing out, getting all crazy. If you have an angle, then we're definitely gonna have some issues there. And then when you have an angle with like a large cup like this, for example, you're cutting off the gas coverage behind it, which means it's not very effective when it's just blowing it all out forward where you haven't even welded yet. So make sure that you keep it as perpendicular as possible, as close as possible. Too close is touching, too close is contact. So you want to, you know, everybody says, oh, keep it about this far away or that far away, but try to get it closer than that. Get it as close as possible without touching. It will stay cooler, it will stay more in control. This coupon is wasted on that side. Like, that's a lot of color. Let's move on to the 2 dabs. You know, I can seriously burn these things all day long because they're ridiculously fun, but I'm not going to take up a video burning like this many coupons. I'm going to save them for myself. So this one is 2 dabs wide. We go zigzag. That's all we do. Pretty simple, really. No line down the middle, no nothing like that. This would be the easiest one to do. But what I really want to show you guys on this one is my foot and how I control everything. So another piece of filler wire. And let's run this one. Okay, so step 1, establishing my weld pool. Right now the coupon is cold, so I'm a little bit full throttle, and I'm actually moving relatively quick. But you can kind of see I feel like I'm feathering it in between. I'm kind of hitting a little bit heavy when I want the filler wire to go in. Let me back off just a little bit here, see if I can find that sweet spot. Now I don't pause when I'm doing this, I just kind of roll with it. All I really care is that I concentrate on where the edge of that weld pool needs to be. And it's little tiny movements. I have more than enough amperage on the machine, but obviously I don't want like all 220 amps that it delivers. I just want enough. So I got it set to about 75 amps I think right now. I'm running on the HTP TIG 221 just because that's a very common machine we use here in the shop during training. Following these lines, making sure my weld pool solidifies and stays right on point every single time. I do not want my filler wire to get stuck. Getting stuck would indicate that it's way too cold. And there I just touched. Oh well. It's kind of hard to concentrate, do weaves, and explain all this at the same time, but we're coming up to the end of it here. I know my foot's been kind of running a little bit wild. Oh, I slipped. Yeah. You know, ideally I wanted to make it through this, just make this beautiful weave or whatever, but you can definitely tell that we have some serious concentration that we need to maintain while we do this. But anyway, you can see that it takes quite a bit of movement in your foot pedal, right? We're connecting our eyes with our foot to control that weld pool. And that weld pool, if the result is it is freezing, solidifying as you're moving and everything else like that, then it's just right. You don't want your filler rod to get stuck in there. You don't want to be really tense. You want to be nice and loose. You want to have your hand move nice and free, everything just nice, clean, smooth, whatever. All we're doing is just tracing those lines out. So I'm going to have to redeem myself on this one, swap out my tungsten here because we still have some sharp ones sitting right here. We usually have piles of these. Out there ought to do it. I'm going to flip this coupon around and I'm going to try this one again. Alright, this time I'm going to try and really pay attention to what I'm doing here. And I guess, you know, it's a pretty good time to talk about two things. I did reposition the cameras. So now you have the look behind and the look of my hand while I'm feeding. I'll just tell you straight up, there is nothing in the rule books that says you have to feed or advance your filler. Absolutely nothing. This is something that comes over the course of time. So if you hold a long enough or a steady enough grip to where you have enough filler to make, let's say, 20, 30, 40 dabs or so, then use it. Stop, do a restart, and try again. The evolution of feeding is actually pretty unique. It's not something that I suggest that everybody forces. The other thing we're going to talk about here is color. A lot of people want color in their stainless beads. You know, they want to see like the, you know, unicorn farts and the rainbow puke and stuff like that. Forget about the color. What we're trying to do is gain control. We're not worried about what it looks like if it's got, you know, decorative rainbows and all kinds of other stuff on it. I mean, forget about that. That comes over the course of time. That comes after you gain control. That comes after you gain experience. And it's one of those things that, you know, it's gratifying. It's nice to say that you can do that, but at the same time, it doesn't make or break a weld. Now, the welds that I've been laying down here on this video, yeah, they're great, they're nice, but I mean, that's the second time on this coupon that I just tipped it. And it happens. It takes practice. So, you know what, even though I touched it there, I mean, whoopity-doo, you know, that's not a bad little coupon right there. And it's really cool. I mean, these things are just flat out awesome. I love the fact that you have something to actually use right now, like that you have something that you can follow along with and you can train with. I mean, this is just absolutely phenomenal, the control that you can get out of this. Now, these weave trainers, these are available in, like I mentioned before, 3 different styles here. You got 2 dabs, which is the zipper, you got 3 dabs, which is the braid, and then you got the 4 dabs wide, which is the stitch. And this one is really difficult. This one is like semi-mild. This one is relatively easy. But you got all these different ones to choose from in stainless and carbon steel. I mean, this is phenomenal. Like, you're not going to find this anywhere else. This kind of control, this kind of good exercise, especially for cheap. So, you know, I hope this kind of helps you out with your weave game. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. You can do it without, of course, but I mean, but to start out, this is pretty good. So I would definitely give these a serious thumbs up. And if you guys want to try out some stainless steel or carbon steel or regular mild steel weave trainers from Weld Metals Online, make sure you go over to weldmetalsonline.com, put in the discount code TFS10, all capital letters TFS10 for 10% off your order across the entire website, courtesy of Weld Metals Online and TFS, because that's the way that we hook it up here. So, you know, I hope this helps you out. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and drop them down in the comments box below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you all on the next episode.